What is tempo? Part 2. When it comes to teaching my students about playing with tempo, I try to teach them to be able to play with the musician's counting tool, the metronome. Now, there are two reactions that I typically get when I pull out my metronome for my students. The first reaction I get is something like this.
Hi, Mrs. Metronome. Thanks for visiting. I just want to say thank you for sticking with me as I was growing up as a musician. I know I wasn't very steady at first when I was playing my music, but you showed me how to play steady, and I appreciate your honesty.
And the second reaction I get goes like this. Why is there such mixed reactions to playing with the metronome? Well, it turns out playing with the metronome is very hard. The first thing I want you to take away from this video before I go into any more detail is that playing with the metronome isn't about playing with the metronome, it's about being able to play your music steadily. So with that out of the way, let's jump into the first thing you should understand when trying to play with a metronome. The first thing to understand is rhythm. You need to understand your music, and when it's showing you the notes, you need to understand how long and how short you need to be holding those notes for in relation to the metronome. If you had a bunch of quarter notes and you have a metronome playing, every time you hear a tick, you need to be playing those quarter notes for one beat. And if you see half notes, every half note you play, you should be playing it for 2 ticks. And every time you see something like 1/8 notes, you should be playing 2 notes every time you hear one beat. If you have a strong understanding of your rhythm, it'll make it much easier to be playing with the metronome. Because if you don't understand the rhythm of your pieces, don't bother practicing with the metronome. Understand your rhythms first. So let's say you understand your rhythms and now you know how long and how short you need to be holding your notes for. The next step is grab a metronome and just start playing small chunks of your pieces, and every time you see a quarter note, do your best to try playing the quarter note every time the metronome makes a click. Every time you see 1/8 notes, make sure that you're playing 2 every time you hear a click, just as I just demonstrated. So this is where things get tricky. The idea is easy, you may understand it, but you might find that it's actually quite hard to do. You might be finding yourself speeding up compared to the ticking of the metronome, or slowing down, and you're just out of sync. It's very frustrating, but you're not without hope. That is good. So now we are going to be discussing what essentially I call metronome practice. The first thing to understand with metronome practice is being able to feel the tempo, feel the beat, feel the metronome. There are many ways to practice feeling a metronome. One thing you can do is do a little dance. Try bobbing your head back and forth. So now that we know how to feel the metronome, what you want to do next is make sure that you start your metronome practice at the right speed. If you're starting too fast, you'll be falling out of sync with the metronome, and that is something that you don't want to happen for good metronome practice. Adjust the metronome so that it is at the right speed, that you're able to play your pieces smoothly and consistently with the beating of the metronome. After you've tried slowing down, another thing you can do is have the metronome count the subdivisions. Say you have a string of 1/8 notes and you're struggling playing all of them steadily if you're not hearing the metronome beat on every note that you're supposed to play. It's okay for practicing's sake to do exactly what I just said. Have the metronome count every note that you're supposed to be playing, like this. Now, the final thing I want to say is that the other thing you need to do for metronome practice is don't use a metronome. As I said earlier in this video, the goal of metronome practice isn't to be playing with the metronome. The goal is to be making sure that you're playing nice and steady. Do your best to try and playing nice and steady without the metronome. Now, of course, don't do this all the time. You're still supposed to use the metronome. The metronome's job is just to make sure that you can hear the invisible pulse or tempo that's always happening in the music that we play. So if you don't get it right the first time that you try playing with the metronome, that's okay. Take a deep breath. And try again. Just do the best you can, and eventually over time, you'll start feeling the tempo and your music will start sounding a lot better. So with all that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and you're able to find this somewhat helpful. I'm Mr. Tobin, and I'll see you next time. If you have any more questions about tempo or have different music questions, feel free to leave them in the comments.